And we are live with Peter Duke, who is
Hey, Addy.
a videographer, photographer, creative director, and he has a lot of experience that I want to ask him about today. I actually collaborated with Peter about 2 weeks ago or so. We were working together with investigative reporter George Webb, and I found Peter to be commensurately professional and consummately adept at his craft as well. And I wanted to learn about his experience because he told us some stories as we were hanging out after dinner and stuff. So I'm really excited for this interview today, Peter Duke, and I just wanted to thank you for coming on the show, coming on the channels.
Well. Thanks for having me, Addy. I think that the way forward, as far as journalism is concerned, is this type of work that you're doing, and any level of professionalism that I can add, I'm happy to chime in. Just because I think that the medium is the message. That's to quote Marshall McLuhan, and you need to actually understand what the advantages are for every medium that you're on. And a lot of people are trying to work that out right now. And I think that it's because so many different opportunities present themselves. You have, even like just in the world of live streaming, you've got, we're on StreamYard right now, which is going out to whatever outlets you've got it hooked up to. But, there's Twitch, there's DLive, there's all kinds of other things that are out there. And as people find different platforms that match their style, they find success. And so trying to dial that in and figure out what makes sense on what platform and what the best way to get a message out is what my passion is.
Oh, wow. That's excellent. And I want to start, we'll get to current events very, maybe a little later, but soon enough. I wanted to ask you about where you're from and why, or what do you remember about, I guess, growing up with photography and videography? Because as I understand it, you're from Southern California. Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah. San Fernando Valley, the Valley, as people in LA call it. Which kind of has the opposite connotation. In Northern California, they call San Francisco the city.
Oh, wow.
And so the Valley is like the opposite of the city, meaning if you're from the Valley, you're kind of like, it's the bridge and tunnel of Los Angeles. It's the Jersey side of LA. So yeah, I grew up in the San Fernando Valley. It was mostly corn and oranges in the neighborhood that I grew up in. I grew up in the same neighborhood that Kanye lives in now. But when I lived there, Kanye's house was literally an orange grove. And my dad gave me a camera when I was 9 years old. He was a physician. He was a doctor. We had a dark room in our house. And so I learned how to take pictures and develop film and do all of that kind of stuff. I got my first photography job when I was 14 years old. I shot pictures of a Pop Warner football team. And I made over $1,000 when I was 14 in 1970 or something like that. So I worked really hard for that money, but so I've been shooting professionally since I was 14 years old. I went to UC Santa Barbara for a while. My father wanted me to be a physician. I became a computer science major because the College of Creative Studies computer science department was immediately across the lawn from my dorm room. So being the laziest teenager possible, I majored in something that required me to walk the least distance.
Yeah.
And so I did that for a couple of years. And then I went to, I dropped out of school. I wanted to be a photographer. I got into loggerheads with my dad. I got a job working in a camera store. I worked my way up in the photography business. I was an assistant, then I was a photographer. I shot fashion back in the 1980s. There were these things called department stores, and they all put out these things called catalogs. So there were lots of jobs for people who took pictures of the beautiful people in crappy clothes. and you could make a good living doing that. And I did that until about the early 1990s when the technology thing, AOL and the internet started to take off. And because I had this background in technology, and I actually also understood the marketing business from the fashion standpoint, I could talk to the marketing folks I went to, the first big job that I got was 20th Century Fox. I built all of the first generation websites at 20th Century Fox, starting with the xfiles.com, which was the first entertainment website on the internet. Just for comparison, we were getting about 6 million unique views a week, unique visits a week. And that was in 1993, or late 92, early 93, I think. And so we were inventing things. We were inventing the internet. And at that point, you couldn't even connect a web page to a database. There was no way to do it. And so we were all figuring that stuff out. And so it kind of gives me a unique, and then I went on from News Corp. I went and I built something with Max Kaiser called the Hollywood Stock Exchange, which is actually the only internet property that I ever worked on that still exists in the more or less the same form as when I was working on it. And then I worked for Steven Spielberg at Sega GameWorks, and I helped develop the first internet games. I developed something that was internal to GameWorks called GameArc, that was the first internet-based game that had live streaming video of the people playing in the world. It was a partnership between GameWorks and General Telephone, which was a company at the time. And I think my budget for that was $480,000. And 4 people in Grapevine, Texas could play 4 people in Ontario Mills in California could play Quake. And so that was in 97, I think. And then I left GameWorks after a while. GameWorks kind of imploded. And I went to work for Virgin, and I built the e-commerce site, and I ran e-commerce for Virgin for 5 years. And we were going up against a company called CD Now, which eventually got bought by Amazon. And we got wasted by Amazon, as was going to happen to any retailer that was in that space anyway. And ever since then, I've worked a various number of jobs. But in 2010, I met Andrew Breitbart, and Andrew Breitbart was delivering the politics is downstream from culture message. And I had never really paid any attention to politics before 2010. I was too busy doing technology. I was too busy doing, the cool stuff. I was too busy hanging out with the beautiful people. And something about that resonated with me. And I took some pictures of him, and I started thinking, I started paying attention to the people that were saying things that I agreed with and how they were being perceived in the media. And specifically, there was a woman who was a congresswoman at the time named Michelle Bachmann. And I noticed Michelle Bachmann because of my fashion photography background. I looked at her and I thought, she's good looking, and she's got a great family, and she's got a great message. She should, go somewhere. And then I think it was Newsweek ran a story on her, and they deliberately put a picture on the cover that made her look like an idiot. And that was anathema to me. That was something that was out of my realm of understanding, because as a fashion photographer, or I shot for, when I was shooting fashion, I shot for Vanity Fair. I shot Drew Barrymore and Mila Jovovich and a few other people for Vanity Fair. And when you're in that mode, you're trying to make people look as good as possible. You're trying to sell them. You're trying to celebrate them. That's the whole point of celebrity, right? And so the idea that a magazine would send a photographer out to shoot a picture of somebody that they were doing a story on, and then deliberately go out of their way to make them look bad, was a wake-up call for me. It was like, really? People do that? And then at that point, I thought, well, I'm just going to, if I can't get a job working for a magazine shooting pictures of the people that I want to shoot, I'm just going to shoot pictures of them anyway. And the nice thing about digital photography is that in the old days, if you went to go shoot somebody, I mean, even if you could get everybody to show up and, throw in their expertise, hair and makeup and all that other stuff, film and processing is expensive, and you would spend a lot of money. An average shoot, I might spend $1,000 on film and processing. And so the nice thing about digital is that I could just go out and shoot pictures. So I started shooting pictures of people that the left, this is when I was buying into the whole left-right paradigm, which I don't really buy into anymore, other than its ability to persuade people. But I took pictures of this guy, Chuck Johnson, who wound up becoming my business partner for 4 years. And if you Google him, Charles C. Johnson, you'll find articles about why he's the most hated man on the internet and why he's such a terrible person. But those photographs, and I made him look really good. I made him look like a rock star. I made him look like he should be somebody in Rolling Stone. And when that happened, it lit a bunch of people's hair on fire. The New York Times wound up profiling me. And I don't know very many photographers who have New York Times profiles, but they thought that they were writing a hit piece on me. But what I knew when they were interviewing me was that because it was going to run in the New York Times Magazine, and the New York Times Magazine is primarily a photography-driven medium, that they were going to have to run my pictures. And I thought, it doesn't matter what they say about me. If they're running my pictures, I'm going to win. And I couldn't even predicted the title that they gave the article, which was the Annie Leibovitz of the alt-right, which on its face is just kind of funny on so many different levels. First of all, Annie Leibovitz is a terrific photographer. She's very good. She's definitely a leftist. She definitely buys into the New World Order stuff and is constantly celebrating the people who are moving that agenda. But she's also Jewish. And the way that the New York Times uses the word alt-right, that's their crypto language for Nazi, white supremacist, anti-Semite. Yeah. And so to call me the Jewish Nazi, which is the way that I interpreted their headline, I got a big chuckle out of it. And frankly, it made me. I suddenly had celebrity on the right in a way that I never would have had if I hadn't been attacked by the New York Times that way. So ever since then, I've just been working with different people. I noticed George Webb about 4 years ago because I realized when I started working at News Corp in the 90s, because I had a golf cart and I drove around the lot and I watched the way that movies were made. And I've always been kind of behind the scenes in the motion picture business for 20 or 30 years now. And I stopped watching TV about 20 years ago because I realized it's all made up. Everything, even the news, they're studios and sets and makeup people and all of this other stuff. And stories get created and get put out into the world. And at the end of the day, the difference between the news and the new Star Wars movie is your perception of how real you think it is. But the way that all of those things are made is it's all the same. So it's all stories all the way down. And so I started trying to figure out what actually is happening. I wasn't into any conspiracy theories. All I knew was that the people that were saying the things that I thought were true were being maligned by the media. And they were being maligned visually. They were being maligned textually. They were being maligned in all kinds of different ways. And I wanted to figure out how to fix that. And I discovered George Webb when he was just still doing thumbnails. He was a screen and a pointing finger, going around on a screen. And then he started doing his live streams, and I started fact checking all of the stuff that he was talking about. And lo and behold, there was a whole different world of reality that opened up for me, which was, John O'Loughlin's bookshelf, all of those books sitting behind John. I started looking at John's videos and then reading those books. And all of a sudden, you start doing compound searches on Google and you start looking around the internet and you start to find out that there's this whole alternate way of looking at the world that has nothing to do with the way that the media is presenting it. And at the same time that was happening, I was working with Chuck Johnson at Got News, and we were trying to reinvent journalism. But because Chuck is such a lightning rod, and frankly associated with a lot of people who I don't think had his best interests as in mind. I found out what happens if you're too well organized, or you're too polished, or you're too in people's faces and you're telling the truth. And that is, you wind up like Julian Assange. But that said, I think that there are enough people out there in the world who are waking up to this, people like you, and a handful of other citizen journalists out there in the world that spawn other citizen journalists. And there is no barrier to entry with things like StreamYard and Periscope and things like that, that if you can figure out what the things are that wind up getting you banned, which George, like Chuck Johnson, insists on discovering the hard way, then I think that there is a way to get the message out. And to quote Joss Whedon, who's probably the captain of all the anti-Trumpers, never-Trumpers, you can't stop the signal. Once the message starts to get out and people start to compare reality to what they're hearing, you can't help but have some kind of an impact. So that's my MO. That's what I'm doing. I'm trying to help people like you figure this stuff out. And when we started, you asked me what kind of camera I have, and having a better picture makes a difference. It changes the number of people that you affect and impact. So I'll leave it there.
Oh wow, thank you, Peter. And what was the impetus for the New York Times hit piece, would you say?
Oh, I was being effective. I was. I pulled the curtain back on The Wizard of Oz, and I was taking good pictures of people that they don't want good pictures out there. I mean, just the last couple of days, Enrique Tarrio, I shot pictures of Enrique. I flew to Miami, and Enrique is Afro-Cuban, and he's the chairman of the Proud Boys, and they keep calling the Proud Boys white nationalists. And it's like, if you see a picture of Enrique, it's hard to make the argument that he's a white nationalist. So this photographer who shoots for Time Magazine, who's kind of my professional nemesis, is a guy named Mark Peterson. He shoots black and white pictures, and he jacks up the contrast in order to create an alternate reality. The interesting thing is about black and white photography is that it takes you from the realm of the known into the realm of the unknown, because nobody actually ever sees anything in black and white. It used to be that black and white photography was associated with newspapers because the technology only had the ability to deliver black and white. And so people got used to this idea that journalism in black and white is somehow grittier or more realistic. But the picture that Mark Peterson did of Enrique Tarrio makes him look white, and it makes him look white on purpose, because the narrative that Enrique Tarrio is an Afro-Cuban will disrupt the image, the picture of him being, his brown colored skin with his, Cuban, native. I don't know. He wears these beads. I don't know if they're Santeria beads or what they are, but they're these big beads. They're very ethnic. They're not your typical prototypical white nationalist signaling. And, so you see Enrique in that stuff, and then you see that they're calling him a white nationalist. And for most people, it creates cognitive dissonance. It disrupts their ability to put two things together. And that's the beginning. If you can break the cognitive dissonance on one thing in people, often it'll wind up becoming a domino effect that just unzips their whole world.
Yeah, it's like the loose thread that unravels it all. And I think it's really hard for people to deal with this, and it takes like time to process. I don't know what you think about that, Peter, because for me, it took certainly with like certain aspects of the dark arts and like trafficking, like took me, say, certainly a couple weeks to process that info.
Well, yeah, it does take time, and I think that my big breakthrough. I think Scott Adams. I met Scott Adams about 4 years ago. I took pictures of him, and he and I are exactly the same age, and we've got some similar things in our backgrounds, but not a lot. But
I saw he follows you on Twitter.
Yeah, and he and I converse on Twitter regularly, and he called me out on Periscope yesterday, I think, because whenever he has a question about photography and the impacts of photography, he and I discuss it. The interesting thing about hang on a second.
Oh, you're good.
I'm having a Joe Biden moment. The interesting thing about photography is that when you look at a still image, it goes right past the conscious part of your memory and into like your reptile brain, and you process it immediately. Photographs get processed immediately. You look at a photograph, you look at them. It's why memes are so powerful. You look at things and they just impact you immediately.
Right.
And so that's at the opposite end of the time scale of what you're talking about, which is opening up your mind to whatever else is going on, and how it might take a couple of weeks for you to figure that out, how to process that. And a big mindset change that I had that Scott turned me on to is to not think of things as true or false anymore, but to think of them as in probabilistic terms. That is, yeah, that's probably 85%. 85% of that is probably right. I just read Kathy O'Brien's book, Transformation of America. I'm going through that 2-week processing phase, having finished reading that book. I don't want anything in that book to be true. My confirmation bias is telling me, oh, there's no way that any of these things that she's saying about any of these people could possibly be true. And yet, as I start to fact check her and I start to go back and I start to check other sources, third parties, it turns out that a lot of the things that she says has a lot of validity. And so when I was reading it, I was going from like, well, maybe it's 50% to it's a coin flip. Now I'm thinking about it. I think it's maybe 65 or 75%. But the issue is that if 75% of the things in that book are true, everything that we know about what we've learned about how our government works since we were born, and I'm a lot older than you, is just simply not true. And that's hard because, and it's really hard if you're old. It's really hard if you're my age because, I'm at the end of my life. I'm at the at the end of the rainbow. I'm on the downward slope of the rainbow.
Okay, sure.
And I look back and I go, what would have been different if I had known this stuff before? So I'm kind of adamant about making sure that people like you try to understand as much of the things that I figured out in the last 4 years as I possibly can. And my daughter's 19, and she's like many 19-year-olds. She doesn't want to listen to me. And so I like having these conversations with people like you, because I think that maybe in posterity, she can look back at these conversations and go, well, maybe my dad was onto something, so. Yeah,
it's a good way to look at it. I never thought about it like that, I guess, in the sense of like, I don't know, like just hearing it from someone who's in that demographic of, it must be a lot harder to deal with that information because you're old, because that trust is there and has been there, but also in the sense that, well, I don't have as much time to do something about it too, which I never thought about before. So.
Right. Yeah. But there, to a certain extent, the OK boomer meme is correct, because most people my age have made their mind up for decades about the way that they think the world works, and they're not very flexible, and they don't really want to change their worldview. My mother certainly didn't, and so where was I going to go with this? I was going to say I was interviewed by Ethan Ralph on the Kill Stream a few weeks ago, and we were talking about the OK Boomer thing, and he said, "What do you say about that?" And my response to OK Boomer, if people are saying it to me, is boomers had parents too. We are all kind of the product or victims, depending upon the way that you want to perceive it, of what we learned from our parents and what we learned from our parents' generation. And likewise, they are the victims or the product of their parents. And so, we can call all of this stuff tradition, but a lot of it is brainwashing. And if you take a look at alternate history, you realize that, certainly since World War II, history has been rewritten. Certainly since the Civil War, history has been rewritten. Certainly since the Revolutionary War, history has been rewritten. And that's because history gets rewritten by the winners, right? And what most people don't understand about how I'll call them the New World Order works, is that when you control all media, you control all of the stories. And when I mean all of the stories, I mean the New York Times bestseller list. A lot of the books that we read are not on the New York Times bestseller list. They've never been on the New York Times bestseller list. But then when you look at the credentials of the authors, they're legitimate journalists. They've actually done all of the academic work required in order to cite all of their sources and do all of the, baseline blocking and tackling that journalists are supposed to do. And yet their books never wind up on the New York Times bestseller list. They never get made into blockbuster movies. And they fall away into obscurity. And luckily, those books still exist to a certain extent. I noticed that they're harder and harder to find. A lot of times when you want to go find a good book on something, if it's in paper, it's very expensive, and then you go and you try to find if a Kindle version exists, and sometimes they do, but if you don't want to give money to Amazon, you can go to Scribd. Scribd is a good source for finding things, and a lot of things are available as PDFs, but I'm sorry. I think I've wandered off the subject of what your question was.
No, that's okay. No, yeah, I just I wanted to ask about that because, but yeah, you made a great point with a lot of the books we read. That's why I like Trine Day Publishing. I think is really great. And you mentioned Trine Day in your what was it called? It was like your syllabus.
My woke university syllabus.
Yeah.
I'm using the word woke ironically.
Yeah, woke university, quote unquote, syllabus where you got your book recommendations, and I've looked at it a couple of times now, and you got George Webb's. Well, you had George Webb's YouTube channel on there, but you added his book, and the Kathy O'Brien book is on there too. I'm guessing that's called Transformation of America.
Yeah, Transformation of America. Her story, as she claims, is that she was taken as an early child, in early childhood. I mean, as an infant, that she was sexually assaulted and terrorized by her father, and that. Her claim is that the Central Intelligence Agency actively looks for pedophiles that have a familial history, that is, pedophilia that runs in families, and that they recruit these people. It's the reason that they don't go to jail. It's the reason that they're protected by the system, is because these children that are sexually assaulted from birth are programmed using dissociative identity disorder as a methodology, and that they are turned into these kind of human robots that are used for various tasks like sex, messaging, because they develop a photographic memory, basically through sexual abuse and torture, and then they can also develop them as psycho killers, so school shooters, things like that. And so her claim is that this program has been in place. She doesn't say it directly in the book, but the person that's intimated to be her programmer is actually Joseph Mengele. And if you do research, there are people that think or believe or have evidence that Joseph Mengele actually made a deal with Allen Dulles at the end of World War II, moved into Switzerland, and then made his way to the United States to start the basis of what wound up becoming the MK Ultra and Monarch programs. Again, I don't know that that's true. But if you read Kathy O'Brien's book and then you start reading other sources, there's a video that you can get on YouTube. It's about an hour and a half long, I think, by Dr. Hammond in Utah, called the Greenberg Speech. Because the name that it's alleged that Mengele took when he came to the United States was Greenberg, and that this psychologist, hypnotist, was deprogramming people in Utah, and all of the things that he's talking about in his book map directly to Kathy O'Brien's book, and that speech was made in 1992. So her book came out in 95. And one of the things that makes me believe it more than not believe it is that a lot of the things that she's talking about, specifically the New World Order comments in conversations that she either heard or overheard by virtue of her being this kind of mind-controlled robot, were conversations between George Herbert Walker Bush and Ronald Reagan and Dick Cheney and Robert Byrd and Gerald Ford. And a lot of that stuff that was written in 1995 maps to things that, people like David Icke and, the headlines are kind of screaming right now. So all of that stuff kind of gives it a little bit more credibility in my book. But if that stuff is true, Man in the High Tower isn't a fantasy. Man in the High Tower is just the current reality with costume changes.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And you're referring to that TV show, right? About like a post World War II alternate reality.
Well, yeah. And the conceit of that, and it's Philip K. Dick, the conceit of that television show is that the Nazis won. Well, if their intelligentsia moved from Berlin to Washington, D.C. in 1946, and they effectively took over the psychological management of the United States, then there's nothing imaginary about that TV show.
Yeah, right. And I've heard, other people too talk about how they kind of see all the intelligence services as overlapping, starting many decades ago in the 20th century, to the point where they, it's just like an overlapping where Mossad is the same thing as the CIA, is the same thing as...
It's the Mideast Division, and it's all the same organization. It's the CIA is just the American division, and when you start to understand that the New World Order thinks that countries need to go away, that they're an inconvenience, that they are a mechanism that's used in order to be able to control the global population, then you start to understand that things like left and right and Republican and Democrat and conservative and liberal are all mechanisms. And my breakthrough to figuring that out, again, I'm disappointed that it took me until 3 years ago, but I read The True Believer by Eric Hoffer, which is a book that was written in 1951, so before I was born. And the idea in that book is that if you can get a group of people together who are frustrated about something, and then you can assign blame for their internal frustration to some external agent, you can control that group of people. And so if you look at if you look through the history, through the, as George calls it, the full flight of the arrow of human history, and you look at every movement, every political movement, every religious movement, they all fit the exact same blueprint. And the good news about reading that book, and after you go through the 2 weeks, it's funny, you said that it takes you 2 weeks. I always explain that phenomenon as getting hit in the head with a 2x4. It takes you a while to wake up, right?
Yeah.
You're woozy, and then you're aware, and then your head hurts, and then
it takes. Well, it depends. I think for the Epstein thing, it was a particular instance where I just didn't know that stuff went on really at such an organized and protected level, which I think was the more shocking part to me, was just the government complicity, really.
Well, Epstein is the government, right? It's just not, it's not the government of the United States, because the government of the United States, if you buy into the Kathy O'Brien narrative, is a skin suit that's being worn in order to make the American population believe that that they have agency through their democracy. But the issue is that when you control all media, then you have the ability to hypnotize populations into voting the way that you want them to vote. And so you create a form of tyranny that's based on social proof. Social proof is one of the things that Scott Adams talks about. That comes from Robert Cialdini's influence books. And that is, if everybody else thinks it's true, it must be true.
Yeah.
Right? So if you control all media to hypnotize people, and they all vote the way that you want them to, then when bad things happen, like you invade Iraq, you could say, well, this was the will of the American people. This was what the American people wanted. And it's because the American people were watching MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, and they were being told there were weapons of mass destruction. We were told that Osama bin Laden knocked down the Twin Towers. We were told, there's a list of things that we've been told that all fit into that Hegelian dialectic, thesis, antithesis, synthesis, or problem, reaction, solution, if you want to use English. And if you understand that these are the mechanisms that are being used in order to be able to manipulate all of us, then democracy is a joke. It doesn't actually work if the media is controlled. So, and that's a problem. And
you just made a podcast, speaking of controlled media and independent media, in the YouTube channel, right, Peter?
Yeah, my friend Tracy and I have a friend Tracy. She lives in Pennsylvania, and she and I regularly, have phone calls where we just basically try to figure out what the heck is going on in the world right now. And a couple of months ago, I said to her, we should just take these phone calls and have them be a podcast. So we started doing that. I'm not comfortable doing what I'm doing right now, but I'm kind of forcing myself to do it in order to be able to learn and get better. I figure I'm good at dishing it out. I might as well figure out how to take it. So that's what I'm doing. And our channel is called The Reality OS, mostly because it was a domain name that we could get. So if you go to therealityos.com, it takes you to our YouTube channel. But we also live stream on my Periscope at Peter Duke Photo, and we're on Facebook on The Reality OS is our Facebook page.
Excellent. Yeah, I just saw that you guys have like 27 subscribers now on YouTube.
Yeah. You know, Tracy pays more attention to it than I do. I kind of suit up and show up. Like if it turns into something, that's great. But like I said, I'm kind of doing this for posterity's sake more than anything else.
Okay, excellent, awesome. That is that's great. Yeah, and I'll definitely link that in the description box below there, Peter. But I wanted to ask more about. You said you helped create websites when you were younger.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, in the early 1990s, after I left GameWorks, after I left Virgin, in Los Angeles, there wasn't anything called the internet yet that was available to the public. There was FTP and there was email. But most people were on AOL, which is an online dial-up service, which meant that you got a modem that made funny noises and you hooked it up to your telephone line. And a lot of people had to get second telephone lines because if you got a call while you were online, it would disrupt your connection to whatever it is that you were connecting to. But AOL was charging people $1 an hour to be on the America Online service. And they didn't have a lot of content. And so they came to Hollywood and they were hiring people in Hollywood to create entertainment content. And at the same time that was happening, entertainment companies were trying to figure out how to advertise their motion picture and television properties on AOL. And so I was creating these things called interactive press kits, which were basically promos for motion pictures and television that we built in a program called Macromind Director. And it would take, and they were distributed on floppy disks, which were 1.4 megabytes. And so if you had the ability to deliver a bunch of content in 1.4 megabytes, you were a high demand individual. And that's what I was doing. I was creating these things called IPKs. And so when the internet happened, when the World Wide Web happened, so 93, Tim Berners-Lee, like I have no idea. I don't believe any of these origin myths anymore. The origin myth is that Tim Berners-Lee, who was working at the particle physics laboratory in CERN in Switzerland, which is, highly correlated with the, anything Swiss and the New World Order is suspect to me. That this guy who's ostensibly a scientist winds up writing a web server, which winds up becoming Apache. And then this other guy at the Mark Andreessen at the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana Center for Supercomputer Applications writes this thing called a web browser called Mosaic. And then they, like the good hippies that they are, they make it open source and they throw it out onto the internet. So this thing happened called a web server. And this thing happened called the web browser. And people didn't know what to do with it. And I had been making these interactive press kits. And so I was very good at, because the delivery mechanism was a 14.4 modem, meaning, 14,400 bits per second is how fast that is. So, it's way less than 1% of whatever the bandwidth is that you and I are talking right now. It was a tiny trickle of information. And so
lost me for a sec there, Peter. Could you just repeat that?
Yeah, hang on a second, and I will make sure that my Dropbox is doing something. 14.4. Maybe you were getting a demonstration of what a 14.4 modem was. The amount of data was so small that it would take 10 minutes. Am I dropping out again?
Hello, I can hear you.
I'm here.
Okay, we're back. I think we're back. Do you want to just repeat what you said there?
Yeah, I find it ironic that I'm talking about 14.4 modems and then my bandwidth is disappearing.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
Right. So the idea was that because I could fit all of this data on a floppy disk for the entertainment companies, they thought that I could make websites. And my friends were trying to build the X-Files website, and I had spent a couple of days teaching myself HTML, which was really easy compared to all of the other stuff that I had been doing. And I sent them a couple of pages of notes, and they hired me within 2 or 3 hours to be the director of design for News Corp, just based on one email with notes about what I thought that they could do to fix what they were doing. You know, and then I was off into the internet, and that was an adventure. But the key was, how much information can you fit, you know, into this tiny trickle, this drinking straw of data that was going over people's telephone lines into their computers.
Wow. Wow. That is, it's amazing. Yeah. Cause I just wanted to ask, cause I wasn't sure if you had coding in your background. I mean, I presumed you did. And then you said you did HTML. Did you learn any other languages, or how deep did you get into HTML?
Well, in 74, I was doing Fortran and COBOL and BASIC. And I was doing Fortran on cards. You know, the IBM computers that we worked on, you wrote a program out on a piece of paper. You took it to somebody who punched each line of code into a card. And then you went to another person and you handed them a stack of cards, and they ran your program for you, and they handed it back to you as a bunch of printed paper. And you went back and you looked at it. Things got significantly faster when cathode ray tubes and keyboards got attached to computers. You could actually type things directly into the computer. And so, you know, in the late 80s, when the Macs first came out, and the first time I ever double clicked on an icon and watched a window open, I remembered myself laughing out loud because I actually understood how awesome that was. And I also understood how basic a concept it was. And I was shocked that, so I was a computer science major in 74, 75, and 76. And so this was, you know, 10 years later, somebody had figured out how to make computers graphic. And I thought, wow, that's great. But again, the origin story of that is that Steve Jobs went into Xerox PARC, which the Palo Alto Research Center, which was owned by Xerox in Palo Alto. And they showed him all this stuff. They just opened the kimono and they showed him all this stuff. And he went back and explained it to all of his programmers. And it's like, there's something about that story that's so like, doesn't make any sense. Like, why would Xerox spend hundreds of millions of dollars developing something just to give it away to Steve Jobs? And then you look at the people who are in Xerox PARC. What's his name? One of the guy who invented PostScript went on to found Adobe. The guy who invented Ethernet went on to found some big company, Cisco, maybe. I can't remember who it was. So all of the people who worked at Xerox PARC, after they gave away all of the information to Steve Jobs, went on to become billionaires themselves. And all of those things, to me, are just convenient origin myths. I think that a lot of this technology came directly out of DARPA. I think that our tax dollars paid to develop it, and then these people took it and then they used it in order to finance their own operations. And those things are becoming manifest right now. The whole idea that all of these woke billionaires are supporting all of this social change that's in line with the New World Order's goals. It's all too convenient that they became billionaires in the first place. If you follow Mark Housatonic ITS, you know, you find out that Jeff Bezos' grandfather, who raised him, was head of the Atomic Energy Commission, which, and then the last 4 years that he was alive, he was one of the first 4 hires at ARPA, and ARPA legitimately created the internet. So is it a coincidence that one of the 4 guys who worked for the government to invent the internet winds up becoming the wealthiest person in the world? I don't know. So.
And that was his grandfather.
Yeah, his name. Yeah, Geis. Lawrence Preston Geis is his name.
Okay.
And now we're finding out that, like, I think Arnold Spielberg, Mark is doing a lot of in-depth research on Arnold Spielberg. I've got a good friend who's close to Arnold Spielberg, but I haven't talked to him about this. He also worked for the Atomic Energy Commission, and BASIC, I think, was invented by him under the aegis of the Atomic Energy Commission. I think that's what Mark said. You can fact check me on that. I'm not 100% positive. But BASIC is the language that Bill Gates was translating into paper tape for the Altair computer in New Mexico when he founded Microsoft, when he quit Harvard to go work at Microsoft. Bill Gates and I, by the way, both are the same age, and we both dropped out of school at exactly the same time for exactly the opposite reasons. I wanted to be a photographer. I didn't. I was designing a computer game one day on a computer that cost $1 million. And I thought to myself, nobody's ever going to be able to afford to play these games I'm designing. I'm much more interested in being a photographer. And so I left school to be a fashion photographer at the same time that Bill Gates left school to found Microsoft. So it's interesting how the choices that you make come back in ironic revelation.
Yeah, with Bill Gates. And I didn't know that about his father. So thanks for that info there, Peter. And before I want to, if you have time to chat with Shrimp in a bit here, I'd love to invite him on. But before we get there, I just wanted to ask a couple more questions about your early career. And would you say that, well, you said, like you just said, you dropped out of school. You got your computer science degree, though.
No. I was just a major in computer science.
Okay.
But frankly, I've learned more. I've learned more since 1990 about computers than I could have learned at UC Santa Barbara in the 1970s.
And your job that you got, where you wrote up the HTML code and basically just emailed it, that was after you dropped out?
Oh yeah, that was. I dropped out in like 78. And then from, I worked 78, 79, I worked in a camera store. I worked in different camera stores. In 1980, I got a job working as an assistant to a fashion photographer. I worked at a place called a catalog house, which I think still exists to a certain extent, but just not like they did in the 1980s, where it was basically a giant studio facility that had 4 or 5 production studios, and they had a big model dressing room, and they would have a dozen or 20 models a day coming in, and they just have an army of hairdressers and makeup artists and stylists and people putting, the models come in, clean hair, clean face in one end. They dress them, they do their hair, they do their makeup, they put them on the set, you take their picture, they take them back, they change them, they move them into something else, and it's like a factory, Yeah. So I did that for a lot until the 90s, early 90s.
Would you ever go back to Hollywood?
Would I go back to Hollywood? I still think that motion pictures are the most effective medium for hypnosis and mind control. Let's just call it for what it is. I don't call it the mainstream media anymore. I call it the mainstream mind control. And to that end, I think that we can make the world a better place by making motion pictures that have messages and cultural underpinnings that move society into the direction that we want it to go in. For example, I love Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan. It's like my favorite space movie. I don't really like Star Wars that much. And when J.J. Abrams took that series and literally put it through a wormhole in order to reframe all of the characters in that drama, I was really, really offended. I was really offended as somebody who understood the amount of care that was taken into the original series, and really offended by specifically what they did to Captain Kirk. Captain Kirk was a clever son of a bitch in the first Star Trek series. It's like whenever he had his back to the wall, he would always figure out a way out of something. And it was always by virtue of his wit and his intelligence and his attention to to the psychology of the people that he was up against. And the new Captain Kirk that came out of the wormhole, the drunken kid whose father who was owed a favor by the Federation because his father gave his life. I mean, ultimately, the white privilege poster boy, right? And was given the Enterprise out of a sense of debt to his dead father. It is so annoyingly messed up to me. And
when did that happen? That is quite the rewrite there.
I think it's the first J.J. Abrams reboot of Star Trek. I mean, literally, it starts with Leonard Nimoy playing Spock coming through a ship through a wormhole back in time, right? In order to change the past, in order to change the future. Tell me that isn't Orwell, you know? So anyway, but you asked me a question. Would I work in Hollywood again? I don't think that Hollywood would work with me at this point.
Yeah.
I live in the middle of a neighborhood that I'm surrounded by these leftists who control our messaging. And I work for Steven Spielberg, and I'm dubious about his intentions at this point, and I look at the messaging of his movies and wonder about a lot of things.
Could you explain that further?
Well, here's an anecdote. So I worked at GameWorks, and I was in charge of the internet games that were in GameWorks. So like I said, I developed this thing called GameArc that had point-to-point people playing Quake. And there's my gardener. So, it's George.
Is it really?
Yeah, I think the door is locked, though. Hang on a second.
Okay.
We're live with Addy Ads.
I know, I got you right here. This is awesome.
All right,
This is like you guys are talking about the real world and the fake world.
Right,
and
this is
their meeting.
Right, and George and I coordinated our shirts.
Well, yeah, like at Evergreen Aviation.
Right, exactly.
Oh, wow. You guys got the polos going, I see.
Just give me a box or something. Hey, Addy, I'm going to take over your interview. Is that okay?
That's quite all right. George Webb is in
Okay,
the
yeah, give me a box.
His interview crashed.
Headphones?
Yeah,
He just totally crashed my interview with Peter Duke. We are live. I'm here in Buffalo, New York, at the Shrimp Castle, and as I said, George Webb has just crashed the interview / conversation I was doing with Peter Duke. You just got there in California. You guys are there, George?
Yeah. This is awesome. I love, bouncing his interviews. It's just the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah.
And I was watching him come over on, You know, you come into LA and it's mainly young kids and stuff, and they're going to the beach, and they're listening to this, and it sounds like a broadcast from space. You know, like Peter's talking about going through all the life hurdles and getting started and talking about, you know, just the whole Annie Leibovitz story and everything. And I remember, you know, he just amazed me with his perspective on all these things and his fresh perspective. I think that's the number one thing that he brings to this, you know, like what he was saying about the Proud Boys and the guy's Hispanic. And here they're trying to have Trump condemn the white supremacist guy.
Yeah.
And he just blows it up. He takes a picture. He doesn't even say a word. He blows up the whole narrative.
Yeah, and he told me that the New York Times tried to do this hit piece on him, which I didn't know that, but that kind of put him on the radar of some conservative groups with how he was kind of just. I guess the medium was Twitter. I didn't really ask him. I would guess it was Twitter, but yeah, I didn't know that about Peter. That the New York Times tried to do a hit piece on it.
Yeah, I think it was Annie Leibovitz. I can't remember the author's name, but Peter knows the story. Peter set me up with a box over here. So he says, give me back my interview. So I'm going to give it back.
Yeah. Okay.
Great seeing you again, brother.
Yeah.
And I know where there's a job for you as a network anchor. And we just got done building the newsroom. So, you know, you're good to go, brother.
Awesome. Thanks for stopping by, George. And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, with Peter Duke photo. How you doing there, Peter? Looks like you got General George is in the building.
Yeah, General George is in the building. That's right. Yeah, I had to move my camera up a little bit. There he goes. Now he's run out, so he's gone someplace.
Excellent.
Anyway, he must have just Ubered in or something.
I wanted to ask you about current events, Peter, if we could, because we actually haven't really discussed that too much. And what are your thoughts on? Because you mentioned 2010 as being kind of the turning point for you for paying attention to politics more. What are your thoughts on the current situation we find ourselves in?
Giant overview. My giant overview is that we're in a titanic struggle right now. Some, people who are religious would call it the angelic conflict between good and evil. But at this point, I think that our government. Oh, George has got his bug assault. We need to figure out a way to get a rev share deal on those bug assaults. Anyway, we're in a titanic struggle, and I want to believe that Donald Trump is on our side. The fact that there have been no indictments distresses me and the intelligent people that I talk to about this more than anything else. So, I believe that he's surrounded. I believe that he's surrounded by bad people. I believe that our government has been compromised. I tweeted out either earlier today or yesterday that if we want our government back, we're going to have to go get it. Because if we assume that it's just going to magically fix itself because of my Constitution. I mean, I used to listen to Mark Levin, and I used to like Mark Levin. But he's the first person that ever used the term that I heard post-constitutional. He said, we live in a post-constitutional era, except that the only solutions that Mark Levin ever suggests for fixing what's going on is the Constitution. And if we're living in a post-constitutional era because the Constitution is broken, then why do we expect that the Constitution is going to be the solution to our problem? I don't think that it is. And but the first step is getting people to understand what it is that's at stake. And I think that there's a lot of confusion right now. And I think that good people who understand the truth about what's going on will come to reasonable conclusions. But we're in this titanic struggle for perception right now, which is why I got involved in all of this, because I think perception is the key to understanding. If you can't see what's really going on, how are you supposed to be able to make a decision about it? So as far as current events are concerned, I don't pay as much attention to it as my buddy behind me does. Because I'm kind of more on the John Mark tip where I'm looking at all of these crazy things. And the stuff that I've been looking at, I think that on the crazy scale is like way off the crazy scale, compared to the stuff that John and Mark look at. But, unless we have the ability to understand what's going on and we have the ability to communicate it, things aren't going to change. No amount of constitutional law or lawmaking or elections are going to change that. So,
what do you think the most effective actions for change are?
I'm going to try, before I answer your question, I'm going to try changing the speaker settings. And if you get feedback, let me know, because okay. I thought I'd try to see if I can get George in on the conversation.
Yeah.
Okay.
No worries.
And tell me if that is feeding back. No, well, it will probably feed back when you talk. That's probably the way that would work. Anyway,
what was my question? I was effective steps for change, or actions, actionable steps that one can take.
You
guys hear people.
My MO at this point has been to use a hypnotic technique called sleight of mouth. And I don't make any apologies about hypnosis. It's a form of persuasion. It's what the other side is using. It's what Scott Adams talks about all the time. And sleight of mouth is a way of reframing conversations in order to get people to kind of understand that there are different points of view. I'll give you an example. I was in my daughter was getting her wisdom teeth taken out. And I was sitting in the reception room of the oral surgeon, and this guy who was sitting there I was waiting for my daughter, he was waiting for his son, and he looks at me, there's nothing about me that screams MAGA, right? And he just, or anything else, he just turns to me and he goes, so how many more years do you think we're going to have to put up with Trump? Completely out of the blue. And I was a little blindsided by it, but I said to him, only 5 more years. And he said, really? And he starts going down the list this was early in the primaries. He starts going through the list of candidates. And I said, here's the problem that the Democrats have. The problem is that they're split between these kind of woke socialists and these people that you would call conservative Democrats. And if you pander to one side, you're going to lose the other side. So I don't really think they have a play against Trump. And I was just being honest about it. And he said, well, do you support Trump? And I said, I don't think it really makes any difference what I believe, because I think that why people believe things is more interesting than what they believe. And that's when, now I use this expression, that's when he looked like I hit him in the head with a 2x4. What I've learned now, because I'm studying hypnosis, it's because I put him into an alpha state. And because I gave him so much cognitive dissonance at the same time that he couldn't reconcile. By using sleight of mouth, hang on a second, okay, wait, here. I meant to hang up here. Decline. Okay. And that's my daughter. That's my daughter. So she'll immediately call me back again, because that's what daughters do.
She's trying to hypnotize you, Peter.
Where was I? I was talking about, because she just put me into an alpha state there.
Yeah. You were explaining hypnosis.
Into an alpha state, and why? You're just asking why you believe what you believe.
Right, exactly. So the thing is about, I think I've lost my train of thought, but the idea of sleight of mouth is that you reframe the argument in order to get somebody I know what it is. He was talking about Trump. Trump is something that is external to him, right? He's talking about this thing that's over here, right? And then when you say something like, it's more interesting why people believe things than what they believe, it moves the focus of the conversation from the external to the internal. It moves it from outside of himself to inside of himself. And once you can do that, then you have a much better shot at getting people to change their minds. But if we don't actually understand how we can get people to change their minds, we're not going to change anybody's minds. Sean Hannity and Rachel Maddow, for all intents and purposes, are exactly the same shtick. They use something called the yes ladder, which is that they'll use a bunch of descending, generalized confirmation statements, at which point they'll slip in either an erudite quote or something like that, and then they'll come in with a suggestion, which is whatever it is that they say. If you already believe what Sean Hannity believes, if you already believe what Rachel Maddow believes, then when you're at a party the next day, their words will be coming out of your mouth as if they're your words, right? You'll be saying that stuff, and that's because you've been hypnotized. So understanding how hypnosis works, understanding how to reframe conversations from being external to internal, those are the kinds of baseline things that we can do, because we need to be able to integrate. If we're not going to start shooting our neighbors, which is kind of where we're at right now, we're at that line, then we need to start figuring out a better way to communicate with them. And so that's what I think the first step is figuring out a better way to communicate.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, Peter. I wanted to add to that, but just before I change an actual step, which I would say is just kind of broadcasting in general. It's hard to like get someone to change their mind if you're being condescending to them, or you're being patronizing too.
That's why I hate this own the libs stuff. That I love Benny Johnson. He's a great communicator, but when they do this own the libs stuff, I just think it's counterproductive. I understand that they're trying to get out the vote and do all of that other stuff, but I don't think that changes minds. I don't think that moves independent voters over to your side.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I was talking to someone actually earlier today, and I was trying to figure out where they stood, and they wouldn't tell me. And I was like, because I want to know why somebody is still undecided, and like get into their mind of the people who still are out there who are literally going to decide this, like why are they still thinking about it, or just get into their mind a bit, because I think that'd be super interesting.
So as you're saying that, I'm thinking about this psychological frame that I've learned lately, which is that a lot of times if you say, if you have a guess for why that person believes what they believe, if you try to guess and you're wrong, you'll mess up your own rapport with that person. So when you establish a relationship with somebody, hypnotists or psychologists call that having rapport, right? And if you try to mind read and you're wrong, then it can destroy your rapport. So what hypnotists do is that they reframe the guess. So let's assume that you guess that your friend is confused because, I don't know, they heard something on MSNBC. Okay. You could say to them, is that because you heard that on MSNBC? And they would think, oh, you're mind reading. No, that's not what it is. And then they put up the wall and they've destroyed the rapport, and your ability to have a conversation with them moving forward is gone. But right. If instead, if you said it like this, if you said, if somebody thought that was because you were watching MSNBC, would that sound correct? So what you're doing is you're taking your idea and you're moving it into the mouth of some imaginary third person, and then you're reframing it as a question about whether or not it feels correct or not. Okay. Yeah. And the idea of reframing questions like that is that you can guess something through this imaginary sock puppet third person. And if that imaginary third person is wrong, it actually doesn't affect your rapport with that person.
Yeah, right.
Which allows you to go into the next question, which you normally wouldn't be able to do if you had just said, oh, well, that's because you watch MSNBC. I love it when people say to me, oh, you watch Fox. If I disagree with them, it's like because I watch Fox News.
Yeah, right? Yeah, that was my family and family friends. They're like, oh, so you think all of Fox is true? I'm like, no, but I don't know. It's like one is more true than the other, but they're both owned at the end of the day, you know? And
So the word all is something called a quantitative, what's it called?
It's not an intensifier. It's
No,
an absolute.
Yeah, it is an absolute, but it's called it's called a universal quantifier. So the thing is about people, and this is another hypnosis trick. Like if people use universal quantifiers, if your family said, so you think all of Fox News is correct, you could just go back to them and say, all of it? Right? Because any, which I'm using, anytime somebody uses a universal quantifier, so I'm using a universal quantifier in order to make the argument, it's always incorrect.
yeah.
And like you could say all women are stupid. If you were answering somebody who said that, you wouldn't have to know anything about women, and you wouldn't have to know anything about stupidity to ask the question back, all of them? Right? So anytime somebody uses the word, a universal quantifier, it always gives you there's Shrimp Zoo.
Yeah, that's Shrimp Zoo. Yeah.
It always gives you an open to be able to question their universal quantifier. And when you do question their universal quantifier, if you pay attention to the expression on their face, their breathing, and things like that, they may open themselves up to a suggestion at that point. But you have to be ready for it. And that's why I tell people that I study hypnosis. I'm not a hypnotist. There's a lot of blocking and tackling if you understand the way that our brain processes things. And that's a long way from actually being able to do it. Good hypnotists are jugglers. And I've gotten to a point where I can do 2 balls right now, but I got to work up to 3. And, if you get really good, you're working on 4. So anyway,
right. Yeah.
What else,
So
Addy?
I wanted to ask about more about your thoughts on Trump. Let me try to put this on speaker here so that Shrimp can hear you. Hopefully, if there's feedback, let me know.
Okay.
I'm gonna hear no feedback from you on your end, so that's good.
Okay, good.
But yeah, Shrimp's in the building.
Sure. Well, it's Addy's show, so ask Addy.
He's going to be in
I
it.
just wanted to ask about, I guess, what are you guys' thoughts on the debate and Trump's status, and just the whole kind of general, the next 30 days, really.
We got something even better than that, Addy. We're making a movie, and it's about you and Shrimp Zoo. You're both going to be in it. So it's about citizen journalism. And it's going to be much more exciting than any debate. That debate, I was there in Cleveland. You guys knocked it. You guys are so much better than the debate. It's not even funny. I'm not kidding. It was a bad thing to watch after 30 minutes. It got very boring. It was like kids throwing mud at each other. And this is real conversation. This is real thinking people talking. And this is what people want, not that.
Yeah, it's interesting. My biggest takeaway from the debate was that about a half an hour into the debate, my ex-wife and daughter called me from the supermarket, and my daughter told me that she couldn't vote for Joe Biden because he, quote unquote, stressed her out, and the debate was so stressful that they decided that there must be nobody at the supermarket right now, and they decided to take that as a cue to go shopping. And they went to the supermarket, and there was nobody there. And I talked to Ali Alexander after the debate because Ali was really stressed out by the debate, and I said to Ali, I said, that thing was so stressful. That my guess is that because you and I do this for a living and we watched it all the way through, that most people didn't do that. And that my clue was that my ex-wife and daughter had called me from the supermarket. And the next day when the ratings came out for the debates, they were I think they had 25% of the audience that the first Hillary Clinton Donald Trump debate had. So they were way off. So not only was it stressful, but it was eliminating the audience. So all of the things that Ali and some of the other pundits were worried about as far as Trump's missteps or things like that didn't really resonate because they didn't hear it. people weren't paying attention. They weren't tuned in. And, that's why, I've been a big proponent, if Trump wanted to do something really like out of the box, that he should be debating Kanye West with Joe Rogan.
That would get eyeballs.
Because that would just be a body slam to Biden. It's like we're not only are you not in this race, but we're not even considering you as our competition.
I thought a short 3-round bout, 3-minute round, 16-pound gloves, that would have been much more interesting. Let them go at each other. Who cares what they say?
Right.
Take it back.
Sock 'em robots.
Yeah.
So
all the gambling bets all over the world stopped when Trump got COVID. So a lot of bookies taking bets before. Once he got COVID, all the bets were off.
We got rocking robots in the corner over here.
Yeah, that was a narrative reset. Nobody could have predicted that. I think it was funny. I guess Kaylee at the White House is test positive now, and people were trolling all of the reporters. I guess you guys all have to quarantine now for 14 days. So is our next White House press conference going to be on Zoom? Is it going to look just like this? Is this the new world, the world that we're in right now?
They're all copying us. All the big media companies, they're all like trying to keep up with all the YouTubers now.
Well, it doesn't look any different from this. MSNBC,
yeah, right.
Fox News doesn't look very much different from this right now.
It's whack-a-mole. Hey, Addy, because you're using your headphones, I don't think that we can hear Shrimp Zoo very much.
Oh, okay.
So go closer. I will correct the record, though. There was one guy that predicted a bio attack on Trump, and it's in a book called Corona 911.
I have to refocus this.
Sorry,
hang on. It's manual focus, George. There we go.
Okay, it's in a book. It's in a book called Corona 911, and George Webb predicted it in his book. Sorry,
it'll happen.
There you go. There it is. So I'm in the envious position now of doing a movie where I actually predicted this, and I'm the only guy out there that has a book that did it, and I did it before 911. So I'm kind of my sales have shot up for that book, so I'm really happy.
I'm sorry, you guys. I'm trying to figure out how to focus this camera.
Now
you're good.
And now I don't know what to do. All right,
there you go. Just leave it there. Just leave it on you. Yeah. I'll give you.
Except now it's zoomed in on Addy's, and I don't know why.
Oh, here I can pull out. There you go.
Oh, there you go.
All right. Yeah.
Well, I have one other piece of news. Did Shrimp Zoo find out that I've donated all worldwide rights for all my books, all my imagery, all my library of images to Zoo for his store, for his electronic store? 1 minutes to midnight, YouTube, finest hour, Adam Schiff's worst nightmare, Let's Call Him McDuff, Subsource Carter Page. It's all yours, Shrimp. You go to town, sell as much as you can, brother. I got you, support you in every way possible.
That's probably George Webb.
Yeah, that's why I like George Webb.
Repeat it to him. Can you hear us?
So much, George. Here, I can. You want to hand the mic just so you can say something, or I sent him the link, but it's not showing up on our StreamYard for some reason. So he can hear you guys, but my mic, I guess, isn't strong enough to pick it up. But he just says that's why I like George Webb, and we've been wanting to get you on the podcast, both you guys, for a bit now. So it's great it worked out this way, and you guys are broadcasting from California, right?
Yep.
Yeah, we're in lovely Pacific Palisades, California, the belly of the beast. Oh, look, there's Shrimp Zoo.
And let me tell you something. I was just in Michigan, as you know. It's way warmer here than it is in Buffalo.
I bet.
Take Peter out to get something to eat.
We'll let you guys go. I just want to thank you guys for coming on, and you guys are going live tomorrow, George? Or
yeah, I'm on with Kirsten W. tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific, and then we're going to do live streams from here, I think. We're going to probably continue the documentary series that Peter and I started a while back, only we're going to be in person, and we're going to have our own documentary that we're going to be showing you. So It's going to be about citizen journalists like yourselves. and we're going to hopefully be able to pull video from your guys' site without your objection.
Of course.
Complimentary in every possible way, and we're going to make it happen.
Yeah, and if you want any high quality footage to Peter, I might have stuff that it's on my channel that I have in a higher quality.
I always like high quality footage.
Yeah.
That's one thing about Peter.
If I could get because you got some footage of George and I playing chess, and I was wondering if you wanted to hold that until the documentary is released, or if that could be recycled at some point.
I mean, I have it available. It's in a Dropbox. I can send you a link to it. It's B-roll. I mean, it's not. There's nothing. I can actually show you how I've been cutting it into stuff, but by itself, it's not really that interesting. But I'll give you a link to the Dropbox if you want to take a look.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Can I just ask everybody real quick, a couple questions before we head out?
Sure.
How do you think Trump having, I guess, mild COVID? It seems like he's recovering it. How do you think it's going to affect elections? I was surprised myself because to me it looks like he beat it already, kind of.
Yeah, I think that the narrative that a lot of people look. I haven't said this online before, but about 2 months ago, a woman who's a friend of mine, who is a all organic eating, Obama loving leftist, called me up and wanted to know what I thought was going on, and I started to explain what I thought was going on, and she said, "Can you stop? Can you?" If I put together a Zoom call tomorrow, could you just explain this to a half a dozen of my friends? And I said, sure. So we did a Zoom call the next day, and I talked to them for over 2.5 hours. And I can tell you that they're all voting for Trump. They were all leftists, all organic granola eating. And the thing that broke them was the transition from COVID to Black Lives Matter. Because they were all mask wearing, social distancing, virus fearing people. And when the narrative so quickly changed from COVID-19 to Black Lives Matter and then back again.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
It broke the spell. And they all started asking, what the hell is going on here? And the thing that's interesting is that, getting back to your question, because I do want to answer your question, I think that Trump's getting COVID and then recovering from COVID with his comorbidity, because he's obese, right? And his age, okay? And the fact that he just went in, it didn't even seem like when he was in the hospital that he actually needed to be in the hospital. That his coming back from that is going to have a similar effect as the COVID Black Lives Matter thing, because people are going to start to question the narrative. They're going to go, well, if it didn't kill him and he didn't have to go on a ventilator and he didn't ever really look that sick ever, then what's actually really going on? It's gonna create enough cognitive dissonance. And the fact is it's kind of like my showing the picture of Enrique Tarrio. It busts a narrative. There's no picture of Trump with a cannula, oxygen on his nose. There's no picture there's none of that, because it doesn't look like it affected him that badly, So
yeah, I thought it probably would, but I agree, it doesn't seem to have affected him that badly. You see him on Twitter and stuff, he looks fine.
He called POTUS a fat boy. Husky. He's fat. He's morbidly obese. He's overweight.
And on that note, gentlemen, we can end this chat. It was great. I hope we can do it again. How long are you out in Cali for, George?
5 days, and hopefully we'll get this movie done. We've promised ourselves, but we always do other stuff at the charrettes, and we don't do me. So Peter's always saying, we got to go cut the movie. So it's all my fault. Because I just get, when you're all in, there and we're all doing stuff, it's a big thing, a big takeaway.
Ali calls it a flow state.
It's a flow state. It's definitely a flow state.
You're always in a flow state.
But
Yeah.
I just wanted to off of Shrimp Zoo's question, which is there is a wild card here, and that is somebody in the Trump inner circle dies. If somebody dies of the COVID, and if you're Peter Strzok and your whack at Trump didn't take him out, and he looks like he's going to be a hero, and coming back, your next is going to be worse. And so I look at the people that you don't know so well, like the campaign manager Stepien. He's kind of squirrely anyway, but Step IEN is his name, or Kayleigh McEnany. If any of these people die, then that changes the narrative again. So just remember, you're dealing with Peter Strzok. You're not dealing with somebody who hasn't been to a couple rodeos. So
it's pretty smart that you're thinking about that already.
Oh yeah, I'm ready for Strzok. I mean, I had a partner die on the day he got fired from the FBI, so I definitely associate Strzok with death.
Yeah.
Rest in peace to Jenny Moore, aka Task Force. And I did a book review on George's book about Miss Moore, who was the investigative reporter partner of George's. And people want to check that out. That's on my channel. And that book is still on Amazon, as far as I know. It's not been banned. And there is
Focus.
Yeah.
That was Stepien. That was Stepien.
Just funny that we're talking about banning books here in the year 2020 in America. We have to even bring that up.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Fahrenheit 451 was prologue. It wasn't fantasy.
And what chapter are we in right now?
We're in the Corona 911 chapter, and I'll tell you, but go buy the book and you'll find out that we're going to outsell that Michael Moore guy who can't make a movie. When he did Fahrenheit 911, Corona 911 is going to outsell it. It's going to be a better movie, and we may call it Who's Killing Trump, though. We don't know. So we're going to come back at you with the title later.
We're going to go run our positioning exercise, and then we'll figure out the title.
Is there
Sounds good to me.
Schedule for release?
No, not until we make it.
I'm happy that George is here. Okay, but nailing Jello to the wall is kind, when I describe working with him. So we'll figure it out.
True.
We will figure it out, though.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Peter Duke, George Webb, Shrimp Zoo, and you guys. I'm gonna play the intro so you guys can just dip out after that starts. But links in the description box below for Mr. Duke's YouTube channel, his socials, personal website if people want to get in touch with him. And I'll link also George Webb's author page for Amazon, his Twitter page as well. He's doing videos that he's releasing on there. And Shrimp Zoo's links are in the description box as well. So thanks for tuning in, everybody, and stay frosty. And we will see you all next time.
Thanks, guys.